Welcome to the Beyond Anxiety podcast, where we talk about dismantling mental health stigmas, mental health awareness through education, and strategies for overcoming mental health challenges. I'm your host, Darius Fennell, and I'm a mental health and therapy advocate, published author, speaker, and coach. I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm so excited to get into this next episode. So if you're ready, let's go. All right, and welcome back to another episode on the Beyond Anxiety podcast. I have a special guest today. This is season 1, episode 7. And this is the first time I'm having guests on. The first few runs I wanted to do solo and just try to, tell my story and share a bunch of different principles. But it's always a lot more fun for me to talk with people. I've been guest on other person's podcasts, and now it's my turn to sit in the chair of being the host. And so this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be organic, and we're just going to jump right into it. As I said, this is one of my good friends, John Zila, who used to live in the same town as me. Still a little bitter about that, but life takes you a different direction. But he's had an impact on my life, and just sharing some of the things that we've both been through with mental health challenges and anxiety and all types of things that really a lot of men kind of suffer with in silence. So or are really reluctant to share kind of their entire journey. But John, for me, has been one of the folks that I've been able to just kind of, bare my soul and share certain things that, very vulnerable. And then just having the beauty of having a mutual vulnerability that allows you to make certain discoveries or not feel alone or not feel crazy. And so, John, thank you for allowing that space for me, because you don't find that everywhere. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and allow John to introduce himself, and however you want to share who you are, where you're from, what you do, your journey through mental health. I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and then we'll just flow with the conversation here.
Awesome. Well, Darius, thank you. It's definitely my privilege to be here, and in a moment, you'll know why. My name's Jonathan Zila. Most people do call me Jay-Z, so that nickname now has stuck. But Beyonce will not be joining today's episode. But I live in the Atlanta metro area. I spent 14 years in New Jersey. So I'm a little bit of a dual citizen here of America, sort of understanding, two very different perspectives on our culture and society. And that plays in a bit to my story, as well. But, I've been on a long mental health journey, that, really started for me in my late 30s. So I, kind of made a long way, have, my wife and our 4 kids, and have really established myself as an industry expert in recruitment marketing, where I've been almost 20 years. So that's sort of the spheres of my life, maybe as it relates to an introduction, and maybe a couple of teasers there of things that I think it would be really good to talk about with you, Darius.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, one of the things that I talk about in my book, and that has affected my life, and I'm sure yours as well. I think we've talked about this kind of privately before, is the issue of stigmas. And I define in my book, Leaving Jupiter, Navigating Your Anxiety Recovery, little plug there, um, that stigmas can be defined as like a mark, a disgrace. So anything that's associated with this topic or that topic, it has some type of shame associated with it. And I know for myself, um, I knew for years that I probably should have gone to therapy. And I had different people who independently didn't know each other. And I met these folks at different times. So these folks would have never interacted, all saying the same thing. Number one, you need to slow down. Number two, you should get some type of mental health help. And at the time, I couldn't see it because my MO was push the clutch in, find another gear, and let's just see what happens. Who cares if we redline the engine and, we can always go to the pit stop, get an oil change, get a new set of tires, and keep flying again until I found out the bill came due and everything came crashing down. Actually, you were still here in New Jersey at the time, and you got to see like I lost all that weight, and my quality of life was horrible. I always felt dissociated, and it was very difficult to go in public places without feeling like absolutely drained. But that was my body's way of saying, listen, we sent people to you years. You didn't listen, and this is how we're going to have to get your attention. I didn't know anything about dysregulation, mental health, nervous system dysregulation. I didn't know about any of that stuff. So at the time, I didn't know what I was going through, but I know what I had avoided that got me to that point. And that was three things, right? Um, and there's probably more, but here are the main ones that I always seem to like emphasize is that you're lazy, crazy, or what's the third one? Um, weak if you ask for help or have to go to see a therapist. And um, for years, I was like, I ain't doing that. I haven't reached the point where I feel like I'm at a crisis. So until I was, I was like, oh, I'll go now. I'll do it. And I thought it was going to be a quick recovery. And when I found out that for some people it can, if they find whatever it is, in some instances you go to the doctor, you get your blood work done, and oh, you got a thyroid issue, or your blood sugar is too high, or here's something that can kind of fix this physiological thing. But when all those things came back negative, meaning, there wasn't a problem with your body physically. I'm like, oh God, what do I do now? It's like, no, you know what you need to do. But for me, those stigmas, I would say for at least 20 years, I avoided getting any type of help or counseling or anything like that because the things that were associated with it. So could you share how that may have influenced like your life and what types of things you went through for because of the stigmas, and perhaps there was even a price you paid for it?
Yeah, I think this is why it's so important to hear different stories, because while I think our stories are very different, the stigma part of it is very similar. And for me, it was mostly as I became a Christian, a father, a husband, there was all these expectations
Yes.
that, have to achieve at the highest levels. And, you know, um, I don't want to sort of pick on Christianity specifically, but the way it came across to me
Yeah.
was if I had these flaws, like I wasn't doing it right, or I wasn't, you know, faithful, or there was something missing, or I could fix it with a bit more of, my faith, And so there was
Yes.
always this like tension um and what was, I guess, unique is I kept achieving at pretty high levels, like in all areas of my life. And so that was like a really good cover.
Yep.
So,
Yes.
so it was like, don't deal with any of that stuff, because from the outside looking in, it's like everything's fine,
Fine.
like there's
Yep.
no problems,
Yep.
until I had my, sort of my break, which sent all those things, like all of a sudden I was like, wait, I'm not who I thought I was. I can't like live this way anymore.
Yes. So, okay. So, good gosh. So you mentioned that our stories are not so much alike, but yeah, everything you just described, I'm like, yeah, pushing the clutch in and going to the next gear. Like the first panic attack I ever had as an adult, because I had a couple as a kid. I didn't know what they were. And they didn't and have the same influence that it had today. But the first panic attack, I had an assignment that I usually I'd have about 3 to 4 weeks to do. And my overachieving self decided to do it in 3 hours. And I got it done. And I was like, you know what? Next 3 weeks, I can kind of cruise for a little bit. I'm going to take a nap. That nap woke me up into the middle of a panic attack. And it made me very afraid because most people associate anxiety, depression, other things like that with like a specific circumstance or a specific set of thoughts. And many times it can be and is connected to those things, but that wasn't the case for me. And I think it's Dr. Russell Kennedy talks about anxiety in two separate parts, like the thoughts and the alarm in the body. And for me, it was the alarm in the body that made me feel like I actually thought I was having a heart attack. And I looked at my wife and I said, "You have to take me to the hospital now, right now, because something's wrong." My heartbeat was up to 140 beats per minute, which I found out later on isn't like crazy, but the fact that at rest, usually you're between 60 and 80 for people our age, right? But it was 140, and it felt like I had just finished running a track race. But there was no track. Like I was asleep. This thing woke me up. So there must be something, wrong. And that's what really kind of got my attention. It's like, okay, that feeling when something feels different
Mm-hmm.
or like a certain type of headache. Like this isn't just a headache. This is a migraine. So you have to treat it differently. Right. And I'm not one to just go up and run to the hospital for any little thing. So for me to do that, it meant like I was panicking about my panic. And I'm like, everything at the time was I was still focusing on there's something wrong with my heart. Right. In the hospital for an entire week. Endless tests, blood. They took every fluid out of my body that was possible, and everything kept coming back negative. And I'm like, there was a part of me was like, I wish you guys would just find something so I could attach my mind to it and say, okay, it's this. Therefore, this is
Mm-hmm.
what we have to do about it. But no, they're like, nope, yeah. And they got to the end after the fifth day, and like, well, hey, just try to take it easy. I'm like, okay, no, you don't understand. I've been here for 5 days, right? You got to tell me more than just take it easy, okay? Like a pill, something. Give me something. Nope. Hey, just follow up with your primary care physician. Well, you may not be able to do that for weeks, depending on how the time of the year it is, how busy things are. You may not get in there the next day or the day after. I'm going home the same way I came in, right? So that was how it manifested in me that really finally got my attention to say, you have to change your lifestyle and you have to get help. And this isn't something we've already ruled out that there's anything wrong with your body, your heart, whatever body system you can think of. They extracted fluids for everything. It's not that. You got to accept that part and say, this is a mental health issue. You need help in that. You can't go to a search engine or WebMD and try to figure this thing out on your own. Have to go see a licensed professional and sit down and have the hard conversations. And I did not want to do that. But this thing, the symptoms that I was going through, they were not going away. And once I realized, okay, I can't brute force or willpower myself through this. Matter of fact, that's making it worse. I said, okay, dang. Well, I guess all roads are leading to the same place here. So, okay, I will do this.
Yep.
But I guess, so my question to you, what was your turning point that said, you know what, if you did go to therapy or decide to see somebody or realize you needed help, like what was your actual, if it was an event, like what actually happened to make you say, yeah, let's go ahead and treat this as I need to do a lifestyle change and get help?
I was expecting a friend over for dinner, and you know me, I'm an extrovert to the nines. So, like, give me all the people all the time, and I am full of energy and life. Well, I had a friend coming over for dinner. It was going to be awesome. And I was in my bed in the fetal position, telling Jen, you got to cancel it. I can't do it.
Jeez.
And I was like, Darius, this has never happened to me. Now, I know when
Yes.
I tell introverts this, they're like, no, this is normal for me. I don't want to do this. But like, this is completely out of the ordinary, and it
Yeah.
really caught me off guard. Like,
Oh man.
my body alarms went off, and I'm curled up like a baby
Yeah.
with my wife sitting next to me, rubbing my back. Like, I can't do dinner. You got to cancel it. I can't do this. And I was like, this was my break where I knew something's got to give. And that was really my moment that I'm like, I got to talk to somebody.
Yeah. I think when I hear that, and I'll ask you this as well, but there was a part of me that was actually embarrassed that this was happening to me because you mentioned earlier about certain expectations, right? Whether it was a Christian community or as a parent or as a spouse, like especially as men, we want to exhibit strength, force, and I'll go as far as say even having everything under control, right? And the moment I had my first grand, opening panic attack, all that was gone and I knew it. Like that was the first time I felt like I remember thinking in my head on the way to the hospital, like, wow, I'm not invincible. And realistically, like who is, right? We're all human. We bleed, and you do something silly, yeah, it'll take you out of here. But that was the first kind of taste of not in my 20s anymore, not in my 30s anymore, and wow, I'm not as like invincible and that kind of arrogant air of nothing can hurt me or harm me and I don't need anything was there was a wall there that says, now this is no longer true, and so when you mentioned about being curled up in fetal position, like even after I went to the hospital, um, my wife had my 40th birthday party, and I had to come upstairs about maybe 5 or 6 times just because I was overwhelmed, and I didn't want to tell everybody what was kind of happening to me, but I'm sure as the person of honor and that everybody wants to talk to, it's like, where did he go? What is he doing? And part of me, like I was like embarrassed,
Hmm.
because everyone who knew me up to that point had not seen me in that kind of vulnerable state, like at a sustained, consistent way, So
Yep.
there were times I didn't want to go to church because of that. There were times I didn't want to go to social outings. And then we had some of the same circles while you were here, and I was like, I don't want them to see me. Like when you guys had your going away party, I almost didn't go to that. I was such in a bad way. It wasn't. I mean, obviously, I love you and your wife and family, so I wanted to be there for that. But I was in such a bad state. Where I was like, I don't think if I go here that I'm going to like make it, and all these people are going to see me crumble. So there was like an embarrassment factor. Like, did you have elements of that as well, or were you like, these people love me, they won't care? But how was that for you?
Yeah, I think I had all of those feelings. I mean, the most potent one for me was my wife because I was like, I mean, I'm sure your wife is as encouraging to you as Jen is to me, but like she says, those like you're my person, you're my hero, you're my knight in shining, and some of those are just, part of our love language and how we communicate, but they
Yeah.
like make me feel like I got to live up to that, like,
Yes.
and so here I am, like, I don't know, looking like a child in the
Yeah.
in and there was a lot of embarrassment and shame on like, why can't I get through this? Back to
Yes.
those same
Yes.
strength
Oh,
stigma again.
oh man. Oh man. Yes. That was a huge question, and this will sort of pivot into the next thing is the recovery. Anything in the past I'd gone through, I give myself like 2 3 weeks. I'll be back in the game, right? I'll get over this. I'll fix this. I'll figure this out, right? No, I'm like, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
like
gotcha.
why can't I come out of this? Why is this thing hanging on me like this? And when is it going to end? I didn't have answers to any of that. And my first therapist at the time came up with this concept of, when these feelings and emotions come up, we want to pause. Number one, that was the first thing I didn't like. And then secondly, we're gonna sit with this emotion and just sit here for a bit. I'm like, my idea of recovery was it's 4th and 20, right? Like football. We got this in
Yeah,
our hand. I'm gonna punt this bad boy as far as I can, right? Okay, we brought it to the attention, right? We've talked about it. We've brought the emotions to the surface, right?
yep,
That was the first hard part, but it wasn't the only part. And I'm trying to get rid of this thing like a hot potato as fast as I could. Just like, nope, because we want to understand what is behind this emotion, this feeling. Where did this come from? What is it rooted in? Where did it start? Was it childhood? Was it something that happened at work? Was it a later trauma that took place? We have to understand these things if we're going to, you know, recover
hmm,
and heal. But my idea of healing, and I think you alluded to this and spoke actually directly to this earlier, was just keep like activities up and make accomplishments, and that'll
yep,
be the biggest fig leaf to cover all the stuff that I don't want to feel right now, you know? And
that's right.
so pain has this way of just being like this universal language of really equalizing and bringing everybody to terms with themselves, especially the stuff that doesn't go away. The pill doesn't work. Whatever unhealthy soothing and coping strategies that you were using, those aren't even working anymore. So it's like you have to deal with this now. So um I guess if you did go to therapy, and I remember you saying that you did,
Hmm.
what were some of the early lessons? Like for me, it was the pause and let's sit here. But what were some of the early lessons that kind of help you come to terms with yourself and some of the things you were struggling with?
Yeah. So I started therapy with BetterHelp, the online little portal. And I was like,
Yeah,
let me just talk to somebody.
yeah,
And I had, a very young new therapist, and when it was just a little bit of conversation. It was like, okay,
hmm
that was something.
hmm
Then I switched again. And so like I think the first thing I learned is like you do have to find a therapist that like you really can be open and honest
yeah,
with. So that's like probably the first lesson,
yeah.
because when I got to the third therapist and she said, "Hey, I have an idea for you. I'd like you to write a letter as your 7-year-old self, or
Hmm.
maybe it was like to my 7-year-old to try and understand them and make them know, something in that child, inner child work."
Right,
And it was the first time that I was like, I felt like therapy was magic,
gotcha.
because we sort of shook some things up,
Yeah,
So I think that was like the first lesson was like, just be comfortable saying, hey, it's not a good fit. I got to find somebody else. And then the second lesson is probably after that little just taste of like, okay, there's what deep therapy work looks like.
yeah.
I then was referred to a trauma informed therapist
Mm,
that really opened up
yes.
the next phase of my
Deep,
healing that's now
deep dark chocolate
ongoing.
dungeon.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And so now we're, 3 years into that journey ish. Um, so like finding someone that has experience in the things that you need to work on, that has been absolutely revolutionary for me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because this wasn't so much with my first therapist. I've had two. And the only reason why I didn't stay with the first one is because they wanted to do more of a group format, which I did for a little while. Um, but I still wanted that one-on-one attention where I could really get brutally honest. And I didn't want other people in the room to see that part of me yet, especially people I didn't
Hmm.
know. And they're not, you know, bound to the laws and confines of HIPAA, right? Your therapist is, but I don't think someone who comes to group therapy is gonna, you can't take them to court to say, hey, you shared something I shared in the group. It's like, I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed. So like, yeah, do I want you to know that? No, let's keep it one on one. So that was just me. I do know and have experienced the benefits of like a group environment. I've even led certain group environments for, obviously, I'm not a therapist. And sometimes I have to remind people of that because they're like, yeah. I'm like, no, I don't diagnose, treat, I don't care, I don't do any of that stuff. So I share my personal experience as kind of a road sign to say you have to find what's unique to you, by starting, you know, with the blood work, starting with the body. Because if there's an issue with the body, no amount of therapy is going to work. If there's something wrong with your thyroid or your pancreas or something else that would show up, or your liver that would show up in the electrolytes and all the other stuff in your blood work, right? Let's rule that out so we can say, okay, I don't have to, number one, I have to worry about that anymore because we've got the clean bill of health. Oh, this is what I wanted to ask you. So there were things with my second therapist that I thought I wanted to do with my first, but I just wasn't in the place to do that yet because my heart was very tender and I had to just really two things. The first one was understanding self compassion. And then number one, realizing I didn't have any for myself. I looked at myself really as a machine, like the Terminator, right? No feelings, no emotions, just like do and execute. Those are your duties that you were raised to do. Get them done. Don't make any excuses. And whatever parts that need to be replaced on you, go ahead and let it break down and then replace that part. Like you deal with yourself
Hmm.
like last. Um, the thing about that was I kind of had to embrace that part. And until you really have that self compassion, it's harder to deal with the hard truths. And so learning that, and the other thing was being gentle with myself. And my first therapist kind of really pointed out to me as I'd be sharing things, she was like, "Do you hear yourself right now? Do you hear how you're talking to yourself about yourself?" And then I'd pause and I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of harsh, you know." But once I learned how to embrace that and do that, I got to my second therapist. Like to your point about the whole, going to the trauma informed stuff. Like now we get to the deep dark chocolate dungeon and hard kind of gravy and Brussels sprouts and all the stuff we don't want to deal with. Um, there were some things that were said to me that I'm not gonna lie, pissed me off, right? And I feel like to some degree the truth has to do that. It has to do that. And not to the point where you're ashamed or condemned about it, but there are things that we've held on to, ideas that we've held on to for so long. And I think you reach the point where you realize, kind of like the Jenga game with the little pieces, that we built all these different, ways of thinking on ideas that just weren't true. And so if I pull that one Jenga piece out, everything that was built on top of it has to crumble down. And there's a realization that, wow, I have to kind of start over in that regard and rebuild a different way of thinking. And I don't want to do that because that's, for me, helped me feel like that's what helped me survive all these years, which is a whole nother term that you have to realize that that's not healthy either. There are moments of survival, but it should not be a sustained way of life. And you don't even realize that you're doing it until someone points it out to you. So, did you ever have moments in therapy where things were said where, and again, you didn't take it personal from the actual therapist, but the truth in of itself, and here's one I'll share that just, I mean, oh man, even now just like, but it was so true, man, so true. And I remember sharing something and it was very vulnerable, and she was like, "Yeah, that's, you're still holding on to the fantasy." And I was just like, "Hold on to what?" I don't fantasize, you know? This sounds like lusty or something. Like, no, no, I don't do that. Right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I keep it real. And she just, well, okay, you have a choice to hold on to the fantasy. And the fantasy was really wrapped around like my expectation of myself and expectations of others. Just wasn't
Yep.
balanced. Some of it wasn't realistic. And some of it, excuse me, was part of the reason why I was experiencing like hurt or frustration or like bitterness, you know? And so when you hit that thing, and there are many things, there could be many things, but that was one of my main ones that, like I said, I was pissed and livid. And it's funny how some of the emotions will manifest. Like sometimes you may cry in therapy. That particular time, I was angry. And I told her, I said, this isn't personal. I said, I just, something got unlocked as we've had this conversation, and we can finish the session, but I had to take the rest of the day off from work. I had to go for a very long walk. And then once my emotions came down and I looked at it from a more logic point of view, I was like, she was absolutely right. And that was absolutely the thing I needed to hear. And if I'm going to grow from this, then I have to accept that that is true. And this is how I've been thinking, and it's not right. And I am wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to admit that, and it's not so much, there's a pride element to it, but again, when you understand how survival mode works, right? You cannot leave room for any gray because a decision has to be made that is dependent on how I'm going to survive this next part of the day or my life. So I can't believe any other way. I have to believe this because if I don't, then
Mm-hmm.
something's going to get me or I'm going to fail. I'm going to feel shame. So I set out to say a long-winded way of what was that for you? Was anything in therapy that pissed you off,
Yeah.
or just made you feel some type
Yeah.
of emotional like release where you're like, wow, okay, I
Yeah.
want to hold on to that.
There were two things that came to mind as you were telling your part, your experience of that. The first one was when my therapist helped me realize that my childhood wasn't as
Sunshine and
normal
rainbow.
as I thought it was, you know? And I was like, oh, it's like, I think at one point she said, it's sort of like trauma by 1,000 cuts is how she described it.
Mm,
And
mm,
I look, I have friends who have been sexually assaulted as kids, who've lost a parent as a,
Hmm.
kid, like the big capital T trauma, and
Yeah.
I didn't have that.
Yeah.
Um, but I did have a lot of, broken family, drug addiction, alcoholism,
Mm,
on top of negligence and all this stuff that was like, we always found a way. And I sort of defended that forever. Right. So
mm,
that was the first one that I just, it wasn't, it was like this emotional release. I think is like, I was like, oh, like my childhood was sad and not good. And like the second one that came later was my childhood made me successful. I actually
mm,
attached all my success to those negative events because, like, I got through that. I can do anything. And
mm.
it kept all that, trauma and just awful experiences as like my winning formula. So
Uh,
I couldn't do much with it because if I messed with that, maybe
yeah.
I'd mess with my success.
Oh.
And those were the two big things that my therapist pointed out. And I was like, oh boy.
Oh, so good. Good gosh. Dude, you're giving me therapy right now. I'm like, that gives a lot of clarity of some things that I was thinking about. Wasn't the same wording, but I'm like, good stuff, man. Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh man. That man. You know, I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but delaying therapy was one of them.
Yep.
Definitely. And of course, you always look in hindsight like, man, especially if you had to go through any type of suffering. And for me, the being in constant fight or flight was enough to be like, you could have avoided this, right? I think it was 2017, yeah, 2017 around springtime. We were expecting our fifth child, and unfortunately, we lost the baby. And I think
Mm,
that was the moment that I knew, okay, now you should go, right? But I spent so much time focusing on my wife, my family, got to make sure everything is okay, everybody else is okay, and I did not check in on myself. I didn't ask myself the hard questions. I didn't know how to do that. It was, again, push the clutch in, find the other gear. And, it was, I will say it was an addictive kind of pattern where most people don't realize that they are addicted to their stress hormones. They're addicted to chaos. As much as we, complain about how busy life can be and other things like that, the pattern and the programming in the brain, it brings you right back to the same place. And this is why most of
mm-hmm.
us, until we get the help we need, don't know how to come out of those, patterns. And so that was my issue. And I wish I had I had everything set up. Most larger corporations will have the employee assistance programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
To didn't have to pay any money at all. I had everything set up. All I had to do was call and schedule time. And I said, gotten through hard stuff before. I'll get through this, right? But not all grief is the same. It's the other thing I had to find out. And now I kind of talk to people more one on one about some of those more sensitive issues and say, you know what? Going through that is a different kind of grief. I know you've been through stuff before, but this is different. You please consider getting a little bit of, not little, getting some help to work through this, and likely the other issues that you never encountered or dealt with before. So, do you feel like you had any type of delay, or you could have gone sooner and you didn't? Um, and the second part of the question is like, because I kind of went through this kind of post with having to take medication. I feel like if I took it, then I don't have any faith. I should be able to pray my way through this. And I tried for, I used to be a part of intercessory teams. I don't know if you ever prayed with people from like other countries that maybe don't have like first world stuff. Like all they have is prayer. And so, like, this is life
Mm.
and death for them. And so, like, I was around people like that. And for a while, it's like, wow, like that. I thought I knew how to pray until I got around these folks. So being around it for a few years kind of helped me to learn how to war, in the spirit and all that stuff, and seeing breakthrough and success again. You can spiritually bypass a lot of stuff because it's always worked. But yeah, there's the delay aspect, and then any aspect of Christianity, that you felt like even post going to therapy, like you had struggles with that.
Yeah, yeah, I think it has been so helpful to me that when I look back, I'm like, where would I have been if I would have started this at 30, or 35, So there's a lot of that delay thought I have that, wish I would have started earlier. I try not to live with any regrets. So I just look forward and go, okay, but look what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I think one of those though came out of that like Christian belief that again, I don't think I could point back to a sermon where someone said negative things about therapy. Like
Mm.
maybe there was a comment here or there or something, but like it wasn't overt. It was that kind of subversive language around like, just pray more or, more quiet times back for us, us 80s and 90s kids. Um and I like built this whole thing up that's like, well, I can't give in to that. And what's beautiful about that is now that I've gone to therapy and my pastor now here in Georgia, like this is a part of like how we serve our congregation
Oh,
is
nice.
like we
Beautiful.
pay for therapy for folks. And
Oh,
so
man.
like,
Awesome.
to me, I've had this beautiful like kind of revolution now where it's now a part of, what the tool set, I guess, is the way I'd describe it,
Yeah.
as is prayer, as is journaling, meditation, medicine, both, natural and pharmaceutical,
Yeah.
you know, therapy, so like to me and I'll tell that story to anybody who wants to listen because I think the more tools you have access to the more growth you can
Absolutely.
experience in anything, and mental health is no different.
Thank you. Gosh, that needs to be shouted from the rooftops. And so I actually did hear in sermons about, man's philosophy. You don't need that. You just need the word of God, you know? And you, you just hear that one time and you're like, should I, maybe I should read my words. If I just read the word, then then if I faith was strong enough, then I wouldn't be going through any of this. I'll just fast, you know, fast my whole life for. Dude, I lost so much weight,
Well, thank you, God, for making therapy. I'm so
man.
grateful to you.
Exactly. Oh man, this has been such a treat, man. I'm so thankful that you have come on and shared your journey with me. We needed to catch up anyway. I don't think we've talked other than text and silly memes and all the J letter videos I sent you that know you're like, oh my god, dude, go to bed.
It's
But
like,
listen,
what time is it?
right. Man, I am the youngest of three boys, and so one of my specialties is instigation and antagonizing, and just really trying to get a reaction out of people because with having siblings that are 4 6 years older, you're not going to win the physical battle. So I had to find some way to get an edge, and so I consider you like a brother. It's only right for you to catch some the smoke as well. So
Well, as an only child, I need some siblings. So
yeah,
I also am grateful to have a brother that only annoys me sometimes when I get another video saying I got to buy him dinner or ice cream or take him on a trip because my name starts with the letter J.
right. I'm like, oh, it's another J video of my FYP. Yes, you're gonna get it.
Well,
Oh
I
man,
just I want to say, Darius, this didn't come up this morning, and I think there's so much we could talk about. But in the middle of my deep therapy journey,
Mhm.
by the way, it's not all magic. It doesn't just go away. It's a
No,
nice long journey.
yes.
About halfway through, I continue to experience some of that debilitating anxiety.
Mm.
And that was right when you published your book.
Oh wow.
And I got an early copy. Thank you for that.
Thank you for first.
And that was the first time that anyone told me who was as close as you were, as a brother, at least a spiritual brother, if
Mhm.
not more, that it was okay to consider medication. And that was the first
Wow.
time that I went and talked to a psychiatrist. I got on a SSRI, which I didn't even know about, and I learned about from your book. I sort of like investigated, Jen and I went through the discussion, and that was like the
Yeah.
first time that my anxiety went back to a level that I could do the work,
Yes.
again.
Oh
And
my gosh.
so just a sincere thank you that you put your story on paper, and it had such an impact on my life. So I do want to just make sure that that comes across to you, because I'm very
I
grateful for that
appreciate it.
that season of life.
Thank you for sharing that with me. And even as one who is super private, I don't like putting my business out there in the streets. Like that was one of my motivations to say everything you just described about not even knowing what an SSRI was. I didn't either. A lot of these things when I was going to the office or going to therapy, I'm encountering for the first time, and I felt just so unprepared and really afraid. I'm like, some of these side effects are weird, and I don't want to experience that. you know. Um, so there was some ones where I said, you know what, this one isn't working for me. We got to come off of it because like my quality of life is worse than what it was before. But that's the
Hmm.
importance of having a partnership with a licensed professional is that you can share those things, right? You're going to titrate down to chemistry word, right? You're going to titrate down to the solution. It's not going to be, this little formalized, okay, do this and everything's going to be fine. That's why it's called practicing medicine because it's a convergence on those things. But thank you for sharing that with me because like it's very vulnerable to put that stuff out there. And even the picture of myself when I was in the hospital, initially I was like, I'm not gonna put that in. I was at my lowest moment. But it's like, well, how many other people may be at that low moment and but see your journey and have hope to say, well, if he was at that dark place like me, then certainly I can recover as well. I have hope as well. And that's what I consider my superpower that I discovered down in the dungeon, down at rock bottom when everything else was stripped away. Hope is what kind of kept me going. Not wishful thinking, but an expectation that, you know what, things are going to get better. I'm going to get better. I'm getting better every day. And it's a progressive journey. Like you mentioned, there was no magic bullet. And if anybody tells you that, hey, just do this, run from them, they're trying to sell you some serious snake oil because I haven't seen anybody who's been through the journey who said, yeah, I just did this and everything was fine again. No way. It does not
Yep.
work like that. So, and even when I see that online or like on social media, I'm like, don't do that to people don't give them a false sense of hope that if you just do
Hmm.
this, or it's just that, or you just need to go to bed earlier. I did all those things. None of it worked until I got behind them closed doors and had the hard conversations.
That's
Right.
it.
So, but yeah, thank you for your transparency and sharing that, how the book impacted you. Cause, not all the time do I get, feedback, but it helps me. It validates kind of the mission and kind of intention behind why I even wrote it. Because there was one person who I met on social media and they were a therapist. So I didn't feel uncomfortable sharing stuff with them. They're like, listen, you need to be visible. You need to share your story. And I'm like, I'm an introvert and private. I don't want to do that. Why would I do that? But then I think I was at PCC. It was the first time that Nicole, my daughter, pushed me out of my seat, like during some type of testimony, something. Introverts do not run to a mic. You know this. You know what I mean? But the way she pushed me, whoever was doing the MC or leading the part of service, saw me kind of like move from my daughter pushing. It's like, oh, you want to share? I'm like, Mike's coming. So I started to share. I got done. I was a little embarrassed, and then part of me was like, I'm not done with this part of my journey. So what if like I have an episode as I'm sharing right now? You know? But
Yeah.
that was the first time people started to come up to me afterwards or on social media if they didn't want to talk in person and say, hey, yeah, man, I'm going through that right now. Or, yeah, that was me a year ago. I'm like, what? I thought you were fine. I thought it was just me. And I was like, oh my goodness, how many more people are wearing this mask like I was, right?
Yes.
And suffering in silence and not knowing what to do or too shameful to go and do what they're supposed to do, right? And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
for that, I will override this introvert privacy mentality and say, it's worth it for me to be vulnerable if this is going to help somebody else get the help that they need, right?
Say it again.
I'll 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 go ahead and sacrifice that part of myself, right? And
That's a
now
gift.
in person like yourself and other people who are sharing that, and I'm sure pretty more there more people I won't hear from. Like I don't need like the ego stroke, but it makes my heart feel good that this was my intent, and that intention is working and is having an impact.
It sure is.
So
And I'm grateful for it.
so thank you for that. And so we're at the last part of the show here, and I got this idea from another podcast. I won't use the same name that they use, but it's kind of a quick round of questions. There aren't any um, wrong answers. These are John Zila's answers. So don't overthink it. Just kind of say the first thing that comes to mind, and this is just more of a fun thing. So we'll just call this a quick round of questions, and there's no timer, but and you can say neither if you want, right? But these
Okay.
are just fun ways for us to get to know you as John
Awesome.
Zila, the person, or Jay Z minus Beyonce. All right, here we go. First question: Pepsi or Coke?
Coke.
LeBron or Jordan?
Jordan.
Ooh, Gen X. Favorite cartoon?
Simpsons.
Nice. Okay. Favorite movie?
Princess Bride.
Nice. Favorite color?
Blue.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Me too. Pizza or tacos?
Tacos now that I'm gluten
What?
free.
Oh man. Oh, you're dangling, man. I don't know if I get. All right. One superpower that you wish you had. You can only pick one.
Fly. I wish I could
Yeah.
just go, you know?
Yeah. Yep. Favorite video game if you were a gamer.
I'm not a gamer, but I'm going to just go back and say the original Resident Evil on PlayStation 1.
Nice, nice, nice. If you had the choice to lose your sight or your hearing, which one would you pick? Yes.
Sight.
Oh man. Nice, nice, nice. And lastly, what is your favorite season of the year?
The fall season. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. Oh man. You left the Northeast and fall is
Well,
your favorite?
I
You don't
know,
get that
that's
good
where I
feeling
learned to love it
down
too.
south? Nice, nice, nice. So thank you for the quick round of questions. That's always a fun deal. When I was a guest on the show and I did that, that was oh man, it was so much fun. So some of them
It's
kind of got me
awesome.
stuck 'cause I was like, this would be an easy response, but
Yeah.
I don't know. um, but yeah, tell us what is next for you, whether it's be in your life or in particularly related to like mental health. Like what's next for you? What can we where can we find you? I know at one point you were working on a couple things like a podcast that we had talked about, doing
Yeah.
or me guesting on and stuff. And life has a way of just kind of juggling things around. Like I was supposed to start
Mm.
this one like 2 years ago, and it didn't happen. So, or you end up priorities take over or whatever. But if you are doing that, I'm gonna automatically say I still would love to be on with you and be in the opposite chair because I had a great time today. And even if that's not on your plate, but just in the vein of that, like what's next for you? Where can we find you? And just kind of give us a closing statement about mental health, and then that'll be it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I am continuing my mental health journey, so I'm going to have lots of things that are already swirling in my head that we'll want to talk about, whether offline or online, Darius, as I continue down this path. I started a podcast and a good COVID, COVID activity when we were all, hiding.
Right.
So I did a full season of How to Human Today, where I was just trying to relate to all the weird topics and hard topics, and
Yeah.
much of that has not changed since, the COVID pandemic,
Yeah.
and maybe it's even gotten worse in some areas. And so I think
Yeah.
I continue to think through how do I help people navigate that. It's a big, just personal passion of mine. So maybe we'll kick that back up. But you can always find me at JZHuman on Instagram. That's where I, spend most of my social media time. And I think, my closing thought is this journey lasts for a lifetime.
Mm.
And it has been one of the most rewarding practices that I've implemented in my life. That doesn't mean it comes without ups and downs and some of the turbulence that has been required, but it's been so fruitful to my future trajectory, the things that are, come with raising children, with navigating a long-term marriage, and all the changes that come with just being a 40-year-old, 43-year-old now, and dealing with all that, But I'm in a better place because of the time, resources that I've invested into my mental health journey. And so I'm keep going deeper, keep learning new modalities, from EMDR to internal family systems. Most recently, we've been doing some
Yes.
work with my therapist.
Oh,
So I got lots of stuff to talk, to you about on
we
that
gotta have a
front.
part two, man. Part two, because
So
oh my gosh, you hit on some things now where I'm like, ooh, we're
yeah.
coming up on
So
time.
keep exploring, y'all.
Yes, yes. Well, perfect way to end the show, and thank you all for listening in. Again, this was episode 7, and my slogan: find your recovery path. I'm Darius Fennell from Beyond Anxiety. Special guest John Zila alongside, and continue to do what you need to do for your mental health, regardless of what shame or negative things could come up. You've heard from both of us saying we wish we had done this much earlier, but life lessons come the way they come. Sometimes it requires certain pitfalls and pain that you have to go through. I know that's what it took for me because of my own pride and ego and really just illusions about being invincible. But I am where I am now, and so I'm glad I did take the journey. We invite you to do the same, and get your toolkit, get your accountability, get your journal, get all that stuff, get your breath work, put the entire toolkit together, and allow yourself to give yourself a fair chance to recover in a healthy way. So take care, Hope Champions. Until next time.